Hi, my name is Toby Pierce, and I'd like to share a devotional thought with you today. We're continuing our journey through the book of Acts, and today we're in the first part of Acts 16. Acts 16, beginning of verse 1. Paul came also to Derbe and to Lystra. A disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek. He was well spoken of by the brothers at Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. Here we first meet Timothy, who Paul will later call his son in the faith, 1 Timothy 1 and verse 2. Luke points out that Timothy's mother was Jewish, and Paul later will write that Timothy's grandmother was Jewish also, in 2 Timothy 1 and verse 5. However, Luke here tells us that Timothy's father was a Greek. Verse 4, as they went on their journey through the cities, they delivered to them for observance the decisions that had been reached by the apostles and elders who were in Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in the faith, and they increased in numbers daily. Well, now, wait a minute. They're going around telling people the decisions that were reached by the apostles and the elders, which, remember, had to do with the fact that you didn't have to be circumcised to become a Christian. And yet, verse 3 tells us that Paul has Timothy circumcised before they go tell everyone that decision. Well, that's messed up, right? Well, Luke tells us here in verse 3 that Paul circumcised Timothy because of the Jews in the area that they were going to be preaching in. Paul didn't want there to be any stumbling block to their preaching. And having just gone through the discussions and decisions in chapter 15 all about that, well, Paul knew that this would be a hot topic and could close Jewish minds to the message of the gospel. He did this because Timothy was half Jewish. Later, in writing about another fellow worker named Titus, who was a Greek, Paul points out that Titus was not compelled to be circumcised. Verse 6, and they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. And when they came to Mysia, they attempted to go to Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. And a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there, urging him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go on to Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Now, did you notice there in verse 10 that Luke first uses the word we, showing that Luke is now accompanying Paul on his journeys? Verse 11, so setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samarith, and the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in that city some days, and on the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia, from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul. And after she was baptized, and her household as well, she urged us, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay. And she prevailed upon us. Take note there in verse 9 that Paul had seen a vision of a man of Macedonia was standing there urging him, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." a man of Macedonia. When Paul gets there, he finds a group of women praying by the river. Verse 12 tells us that they were in Philippi for some days before the Sabbath day. Paul would have gone to teach in the synagogue if there had been one. That was his custom. But apparently, he asked around enough to find that there were some worshipers that would gather at the river on the Sabbath. So Lydia was from Thyatira and now in Philippi. So she was about 300 miles away from her hometown. She's running a business and she's a seller of purple. The purple dye was made from plants that grew in that area. She may have sold the dye, or she may have sold material or clothing that was colored from the purple dye. Her business would cater to those that were wealthy. Lydia is Jewish, either by birth or a proselyte, and even though she's in this heathen town and far away from home, she's worshiping. That's what faithful folks do. When you travel, look beforehand to find a congregation you can worship with. Or if there's not one, find a place. Whether that's your hotel room or a campsite, find some place where you can focus on God and honor Him. Having an open heart, she pays attention to Paul as he preaches the gospel. Faith comes by hearing, Romans 10 and 17. And just as in Acts chapter 2 and verse 37, when the people heard Peter, when he preached, and they were cut to the heart. In preaching the gospel, we know that Paul taught about baptism because Lydia gets baptized. Some have tried to use this passage to promote infant baptism, saying that Lydia's household was baptized and that Lydia must have had a tiny baby in her household. There's nothing to indicate that. You know, when you take a census today, it is by household. Do you assume that every household has a tiny baby? Doesn't make sense, does it? The text even implies that she is single. It is her business. She calls it my house. And there was not a man worshiping with the women by the river. It's not likely that she has a baby with no father for the baby. That reasoning makes no sense at all. It's important to Lydia that she be found faithful to the Lord, and she makes that evident by urging Paul and those accompanying him to stay with her at her house. She acted on her faith. I know it's important for you too to be found faithful to the Lord too. How will you act on your faith? Next time, we'll look at the Philippian jailer in the last half of Acts 16. I hope you have a blessed day.
If you would like more information, or if you'd like to participate in our Bible studies and worship services, we would love to have you come join us at the Northeast Church of Christ in Albuquerque, New Mexico.